Afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Dr. Khanna, for this wonderful opportunity today. Uh, I'll just move on. Accidental inoculation exposure. What do we really mean by this term exposure? It could mean any percutaneous injury that we normally have from any sharp or from any needle. It could mean a contact with the mucous membrane of the eye or the mouth, or even contact with the non-intact skin, where the integrity of the skin is compromised, like maybe abraded or chapped or with ulcers. And contact with potentially infectious body fluids, which could be more infectious or which could have a lesser risk of transmission. That is something like sweat or saliva or tears. They generally have a lesser risk of transmission. And more is any body fluid which is contaminated with blood, visible blood that is, and it could be pericardial fluid or peritoneal fluid or so on. The incidence of these injuries, it varies substantially by region, the number of healthcare workers involved, region-wise, there's a lot of variation. In US and UK, it's been generally termed from to over 1 lakh, and it could range till about 10 lakh per year. In India, unfortunately, the data is very scarce. And underreporting is a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, it ranges from about 22% to 99%. And the reasons for underreporting could be varied. Concerns about job security. I did not know I had to, or I could not spare the time. Or, one is worried about the extra paperwork involved. Or one is really scared about maybe we are already harboring some diseases which might just show up. So the area of injury now, whether it is the OTs or the labs or the OPDs, again, this has a wide variation. Various studies have been done in this aspect. And as you can see, the cath lab, some have favored it around 0.2%. Other studies have put it at 2%. And considering the total number of N is approximating 1,500, that's a very, very wide number again. The immediate action plan is one what needs to keep in mind. That's action one, which is the most important, is wash. If it's your finger that has been pricked accidentally, wash with plenty of water. The most simplest and the most important, and which unfortunately many of us tend to neglect that time. So please wash with plenty of water. If you're removing gloves, remove and wash. If you're wearing contact lenses and if it's gone into your eyes, please remove your contact lenses, wash either at an eye wash station or splash with plenty of water. And please do not panic. Please do not panic. The needle may have been used on a known HIV, HCV, whatever. Please do not panic and just do the first step properly. And do not put the injured finger into the mouth. Many times it's seen as a reflex action, and which we encounter many times. The staff comes up and it's like kind of a reflex action. They have this needle prick and the finger immediately goes into the mouth. Please do not use that. And studies have shown no extra use of any kind of alcohol or any disinfectant if you put on the finger. Action two is reporting, where again the other formalities can be done. Reporting immediately is what is required. It could be any authorized area in your own facility, could be the staff clinic, could be the emergency. But what is essential, it has to be a 24 hours system so that one can report immediately, even if it be the middle of the night. And what is to be done there is first aid, injection tetanus, appropriate sampling, and post-exposure prophylaxis wherever required. Appropriate sampling of the exposed, very essential as a baseline, and of the source if known again. Many instances, it may not be known. The needle may have been lying in one of plenty in the sharp container. It may have been found accidentally in the garbage bag. Or maybe at the end of the day when you're done with all your procedures in the cath lab, you accidentally happen to be scrubbing and you realize there's some kind of blood there, and maybe you've had a needle prick. So of course in that cases, the source is not known, but if known, what one needs to do is a workup for hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV. And in the exposed, what is very essential, the anti-HBs. The hepatitis B antibodies, the titers is very essential because that is going to tell us the next step of action. So in case the status of the source, it may be an hepatitis B positive, it may be a negative, depending on that. So if it's a previously vaccinated and you know that the titers are adequate, we take more than 10 IU per liter as adequate, then nothing to worry about. Even if the source is HBsAg positive, there is nothing to be done if you have adequate titers on you. And in case it is a case of non-adequate titers or maybe a non-responder, then one needs to go on immediately to at least 2 doses of immunoglobulin taken 1 month apart, or the other option is 1 hepatitis B immunoglobulin and 1 dose of vaccine. So depending on what the situation is. And in case the source is a known hepatitis B negative, then one need not go in for the next treatment. And of course, if it's a high risk, if the source is not tested or unknown many times, one needs to test, or if you think it's a high risk situation for hepatitis B, go in immediately for the status. Many times the source patient is an hepatitis C positive. So of course the exposed sampling baseline a must for the ALT as well as the anti-HCV, the antibodies, and a follow-up to be done. Follow-up at least to be done for a retest for 3 months, 6 months, and 1 year. Very, very essential for a follow-up on all these times. And sometimes one even goes in for a 4 to 6 weeks follow-up in case it's a high-risk situation. And any antibodies tested, please confirm it by molecular testing. That is essential. For HIV, the eligibility for the PEP needs to be established first. That is the first thing that needs to be established. And in case required, please do not delay. Ideally, within 2 hours is what the situation demands, but certainly within 72 hours. So therein lies the situation of reporting immediately to a central place. And how do we determine the eligibility? It could be either by the HIV status code, what we term it as HIV-SC, or the exposure code, what we term as EC. What is the SC? How do we take that out? If it's an HIV negative, no PEP needed. If HIV positive, depending on how much we see is the titer exposure. It could be a low or a high, and accordingly it could be an SC1 or a SC2 situation. And if the status of the source is unknown, then obviously it goes into the unknown term. And how do we determine the EC code? Is the source blood, or is it body fluids, or it's an other potentially infectious material, or it could be some contaminated instrument, and it's a visibly soiled instrument. So if it is so, then we have to see whether it is a blood or body fluid, or it's an OPIM. And again, what type of exposure has occurred if it is blood or body fluid. If it's intact skin only, if one is sure it's intact skin, no PEP is needed. And if the exposure has occurred and it's a percutaneous exposure, depending on the severity again, a less severe or a more severe. A less severe could be just a superficial scratch, and a more severe could be something by a needle which has already gone into an artery or a vein, or it could be a thick, sharp needle, a whiteboard needle. So that would be termed as EC2 or EC3. And again, one has to see the mucous membrane or the skin integrity. Is it compromised? If yes, then is the volume that is exposed, is it small, is it large? And accordingly, EC1, EC2. And of course, if the exposure is to none of these, then one comes into the no category and no PEP needed. And then we have a kind of grading between the EC and the SC where the recommendations are based on whether PEP shall be given or would not be given. So if it is 1 in both the situations, generally PEP is not warranted for HIV. Again, depending on whether the EC is 1 or 2 or beyond it, and accordingly with the SC, we decide whether it should be a basic regimen we go in for or an expanded regimen. So it depends on the number of drugs and the type of drugs accordingly as to a basic or an expanded regimen. And in fact, many times an expert opinion is generally required for an HIV because many instances the reporting may be delayed. It may be a later than 72 hours reporting. So whether one should go in really for it or not, or the needle is unknown, how high does the risk situation, again the toxicity has to be weighed again whether it should be given or not. But whatever it is, the follow-up needs to be done very strictly. In case the source has been put on the PEP, then re-evaluation within 72 hours is recommended. And even if PEP has not been started, a follow-up is essential at 3 months and 6 months. 12 months is a plus-minus situation unless the patient has a very demanding situation like is co-infected with a hepatitis C virus along with HIV, then yes, an extended HIV follow-up may be required in those cases. And one needs to be advising other things also during the PEP to avoid pregnancy till one is confirmed that one is HIV negative, avoid blood donation, tissue donation, and so on. So just to summarize, what is the surveillance summary for any kind of exposure? For hepatitis C, 6 weeks if high risk, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months is what the situation always demands. HIV, yes, we have a follow-up for 6 weeks, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, again, plus and minus. Hepatitis B, depending on the last vaccine dose, at least 1 to 2 months after the last dose of vaccine series. In cases where an immunoglobulin has been given, you go in for a recheck of the titers at least 3 to 6 months after the last dose. And confidentiality is a must. In all cases, this has to be very strictly maintained. And informed consent, especially when you're going in for the HIV testing, both for the source and the exposed. So it needs to be really professionally explained. The seroconversion from a known positive source, if you see here, the actually risk of HIV is the least, about 1 in 300 to put it roughly, whereas for hepatitis B, it's 1 in 3, and hepatitis C, 1 in 30. And again, hepatitis B, obviously the risk is if you're not hepatitis B vaccinated. So really very essential to maintain your protective hepatitis B titers. And action 3 is filling up of the accidental inoculation exposure form so as to, one can keep on a follow-up and also analyze as to how the mode of injury was so that one can go in for further prevention. This is just a summary of what the different modes of injury could be, and many of them are preventable. So the first thing is to maintain a hepatitis B titer of a protective dose. Then one really need not be worried at least of a hepatitis B exposure. And of course, to keep other things in mind, be aware, do not recap or manipulate needles. Many times these injuries have been seen due to it. And these are just preventable things. And the main thing is to have a very active surveillance at source, have a good infection control program so that there is very active surveillance accordingly into it. And the sharp containers should be readily available at source so that one can just be absolutely sure that one is discarding immediately after use. So education and re-education and reinforcement, that is how it should be. Whereas awareness method should be adopted by the facility, to have the basic concept, and everyone should know, even if it is someone in the middle of the night, one should know what to do, where to go, and how to go about it. So as we all know, there is no cost in material terms to equate with human life or misery. Thank you.